Along with all the head coaching and general manager jobs opening, the NFL saw a slew of coordinator jobs open as well. And one on the list might be more of a personnel issue than an actual coordinator issue. Let's dive into that as we continue on our week here at the Peacock Williamson NFL Show.
NFL analyst Brian Peacock and former NFL scout Matt Williamson bring you expert NFL analysis every day in less than 30 minutes. Get an inside look at the NFL on the field and in the front office with elite breakdowns to next-level analysis and in-depth information only for the real NFL fans. This is Peacock and Williamson, and it starts now.
What's going on, football fans? Welcome into another episode of the Peacock and Williamson NFL Show. We are your hosts, former NFL scout Matt Williamson, Locked On Podcast Network NFL expert Ross Jackson here, and we are grateful to be with you for another episode of the Peacock and Williamson NFL Show. On today's episode, I'm going to tell you a little bit about what I think the futures of running back Alvin Kamara and quarterback Derek Carr look like in New Orleans and see what Matt thinks about it. We'll dive into the next Sam Darnold. Really good question here from one of our listeners, Matt. Who is the next Sam Darnold? While we ponder about that, though, we're going to take a look at all the coordinator spots that have opened up. And this is key so far in the NFL because there's a lot. Yeah, there's a lot that are open and there could be more on the way. We'll dive into all that on today's episode. We appreciate you very much making us your first listen and for being an everydayer here on the show, which is a proud part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode brought to you by our friends at Crossover Thursday, actually, across the entire network, brought to you by our friends over at Prize Picks. All you got to do is download the Prize Picks app, use the promo code Locked On NFL, and you're going to get $50 instantly when you play your first $5. Matt is going to go another show without calling me Ross Tucker. It's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. Matt, we got a lot of coordinators to fire through here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 different coordinator spots already open across the NFL, offense, defense, and certainly more that could be on the way. Let's start with Cincinnati defensive coordinator Lou Anarumo, a guy that had been a head coach candidate and got a lot of that kind of hype a while, not too long ago at all. And now all of a sudden, no longer and out rather as the defensive coordinator in Cincinnati. What do you make of this one?
Yeah, this one I'm going to spend a little more time on because I think the history here is really important. That the Bengals drafted Chase and Burrow and Higgins, and that's great. You know, they not lucked into, but they, you know, that worked out really well for them. And those guys weren't making a lot of money on rookie deals. And a notoriously frugal organization changed their tune and went out and bought a defense, basically. I mean, the Hendrickson and Hilton, et cetera, they spent a lot of money on defense because they had very little invested on offense. So that worked out really well. And his team went to a Super Bowl and, you know, it has had a lot of success lately. Now, wisely, the Bengals realized we're going to have to start paying these offensive guys now. So the last couple drafts, they've drafted defense very, very heavy. They've just been bad at it. Yeah. I mean, to be honest, there's like no hits. I mean, there's all these early picks, and there's been some injuries, Dax Hill and Turner, the 2 Michigan defensive backs. But really, none of their early picks the last 2 or 3 years are all that promising. And in the meantime, the guys they bought are aging out. You know, they're all declining, and the next wave isn't coming in other than Hendrickson, who's been phenomenal. So, a year ago, they lost Bates and they lost both their safeties. And in his scheme, they ask a lot of the safety position. You know, we need to be really cerebral, really versatile. So they went out and got him a couple safeties. You know, they went out and got Geno Stone and they brought back Von Bell. And that didn't work out either. But I really think this case is he didn't lose his fastball. It's just he doesn't have any good players on defense. They really don't. I mean, that Bengals team, they played the Steelers twice recently, and including Week 18, I really dug into them. As amazing as they are on offense, they were equally bad on defense. Everything they did on offense, like canceled out exactly. They're even Steven.
Yeah, it felt like watching the 2014, 15, and 16 New Orleans Saints. Like Drew Brees was at the top of his game, but that defense was 31, 32 in every metric across the defensive side. It's an interesting one. I think
probably know this. Sorry to interrupt, but I'm almost certain there was a stretch there. As long as the Saints defense wasn't bottom 5, they went to the playoffs.
That was exactly it. That's all you had to do. You had to be okay.
Not
because Drew Brees would do the rest.
Yeah.
Drew Brees would do the rest. I imagine Anarumo is going to be a big name for other teams looking for a defensive coordinator. And one of the potential landing spots, we don't have to super dig into this one, but San Francisco, Nick Sorensen let go of there over on the defensive side. I think a lot of people are pointing to Robert Saleh, but that could be a fit for Anarumo over in San Francisco to complement that Kyle Shanahan offense.
Yeah, and I'm actually excited to talk to BP about that a little bit too. I mean, that's another team that got hit pretty hard by injuries. We know the Niner way is bringing hockey lines of defensive linemen, and Hargrave got hurt. Bosa was in out of the lineup. It wasn't as deep a group. So, Warner was playing on a bad ankle, and that's not to excuse it, but I mean, it kind of felt like, I don't know that they did a poor job defensive coordinating, I mean, right. Good as Saleh or, why am I blanking on the Texans head coach? I mean, they've had some really
D'Amico Ryans.
Right. I mean, so they were big shoes to fill.
Yeah, for sure. Let's look at Seattle. This was another interesting one for a
really
bit of a different reason, right?
Yeah.
Seattle moving on from Ryan Grubb after a year.
And it wasn't great, and they didn't have linemen. That's their biggest problem personnel-wise, is protection's a real issue. Yep. But I wanted to spend an extra minute on this one too, just because I want our listeners to understand that if you're calling plays at the college level and then you go to the NFL, things that people might not even think about are, because the hash marks are different, if you're going to do a 3x1 set, well, all the geometry is different. Your route concepts are different. The width of your route concepts are different. Your starting points are different. That in itself is a big challenge, just, drawing up the plays. They don't translate. They're not exactly the same. And I don't know if he's a good coach or not, but I do think it certainly helps to have, a year ago at the University of Washington, a first-round corner, a first-round left tackle, a second-round right tackle, a running back that ended up in the league, 3 receivers that were all drafted very high. He was pretty loaded with talent.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. It goes to show sort of that leap, right? It's tougher. It's tougher, I think, than people think. It's tough for the players. Can be tough for the guys that are managing multiple players as well. One of the other departures that we've seen, we've discussed already, Gus Bradley, defensive coordinator for the Indianapolis Colts. You can go back to really the last couple of episodes. We've kind of mentioned that one, but the Raiders, who not only moved on from Antonio Pierce, which we broke down in yesterday's episode, they also during the season moved on from offensive coordinator Luke Getsy. So that's one of the ones that's been open for a little while and might kind of miss some of the news cycle because it's been open for since the middle of the season.
Yeah, and who knows? I mean, that's not uncommon. Obviously, when the head coach goes, the coordinators are unlikely to return, of course.
Yep.
And I've mentioned before, I have a personal relationship with Luke because I'm rooting for him. So when I took the Pitt job, he had committed to Pitt, so we both got to Pitt at the same time. He's a Steel Valley High School quarterback, and then when I went to Akron, he kind of went with me, and not that because of me. We had a bunch of the Pitt staff left, and he became Charlie Fry's replacement, transferring from Pitt to Akron. Then he got into coaching and coached at Akron, and good dude. I'm just rooting for him,
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's just, I don't know. That wasn't the greatest situation. When you talk about not a lot of talent over the defensive side in Cincinnati, certainly not a lot of talent on the offensive side over in Las Vegas, outside of course, Brock Bowers. Like, I'm not going to.
Yeah, that's a promising spot.
Yeah, I'm not going to slight Brock Bowers. He'll beat me up. 2 other guys that were moved on from this during the season: Shane Waldron, offensive coordinator with the Chicago Bears, formerly of the Seattle Seahawks, and then Ken Dorsey of the Cleveland Browns. What do you make of those 2 moves?
I mean, Bears are going to clean house. So I mean, that's not surprising.
Sense.
And he didn't get a lot out of the group. And frankly, I thought the Bears offense kind of got kickstarted after he got let go. I mean, Brown is who they bumped up, and that poor guy got thrown into being a head coach right away, which, the bump to coordinator was a big enough one. I thought he was good at it. Yeah. My hunch in Cleveland, not the most patient organization, and I don't think they were going to fire Stefanski, and they certainly weren't going to fire the defensive coordinator. Right. But I guess kind of bet somebody had to go. Mm-hmm. And I saw this yesterday. I mean, they're FTN now, but they used to be Football Outsiders, DVOA. Mm-hmm. that if they said if you took out the couple Winston games, that would have been the worst offense in DVOA history. And it wasn't far off with the Winston games.
Right, yeah.
I mean, it's a pretty miserable group, but I think Deshaun Watson has more to do with it than Ken Dorsey.
Yeah, I think so too. So too. And of course, that Deshaun Watson situation has just completely blown up too. Setbacks and the injury, what is, what won't be. It's going to be very, very interesting to see how all of that pans out. Coming up next, let's dive into the next Sam Darnold. Great question from one of our listeners, Brian, who wants to know who the next Sam Darnold is. We have some ideas in one particular name that certainly stands out. Let's dive into that next as we continue on with today's episode of the Peacock Williamson NFL Show, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode of the Peacock Williamson NFL Show brought to you by friends over at Game Time, my favorite place to go to buy tickets, whether you're planning months in advance or if you're like me and you like to plan moments in advance, or if you travel a lot, spontaneously want to see what's going on over, in the city that you're in. The Game Time app is awesome. You simply open it up, and then when you open it up, it's going to give you the opportunity to be able to just pick from, different cities, everything like that. You could change it and you can figure out like what's going on across all these different places. And then when you get there, you find things like here in New Orleans, I got New Orleans Pelicans tickets for $1. Now that probably has more to do with the New Orleans Pelicans than anything else, but that's okay. It's still great to be able to do that. So you can go and check them out today. Download the Game Time app and then take them with you wherever you go. They're taking all of the guesswork out of buying tickets. All you got to do is download the Game Time app, create an account, and use that promo code LOCKEDONNFL. It's going to give you $20 off of your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game time. All right, Matt, as we move on here on today's episode of Peacock and Williamson NFL Show, Matt Williamson, Ross Jackson filling in for Brian Peacock. We're taking a look here at a question from another Brian, a listener, Brian, who wants to know who is next year's Sam Darnold. We've had some time to ponder it. Mm-hmm. Who stands out for you as maybe that next guy, or maybe we should set the table, right? Of who Sam Darnold turned out to be this season.
Right. So a couple of notes, big picture stuff here. Mm-hmm. This doesn't happen every year, that an
Good
early
point.
pick just revitalizes their career and goes on to make a huge contract and, be a playoff type team. And, this isn't a common occurrence.
Yeah.
Now, I also think, and we mentioned this yesterday, that regardless of team, if you guys listening would just pick who you think the 32 starting quarterbacks will be, no matter where they land, you're going to be short. So I think there will be a team or two crossing their fingers that they get the next Sam Darnold, some revitalized guy, a former pick that just had it tough or didn't mature quick enough or injuries or whatever. And we have seen Baker Mayfield, and Geno Smith's one of the best examples of late in career.
Yeah, right.
Really vitalized his career. It kind of came out of nowhere. So, and the other thing is too, I also found it interesting that last offseason that almost entire Kenny Pickett class all got traded. Like Ritter, Howe, Pickett, Willis, also Mac Jones. He's a year older than those guys. I draft the dude. I want the old guy out of here. Not that Mac Jones did anything wrong necessarily, but I don't need him hovering over Drake May. I mean, I don't need Ritter hovering over Penix. So some of those guys could go. And the one name I came up with that is, what about Will Levis? I mean, I don't love him as a player, but they're probably going to take a quarterback first overall. Do you want Levis still looming around? I mean, bring back Rudolph as kind of the mentor. I'm not saying any of these guys are going to go on and be Pro Bowlers, but he fits that mold.
Yeah.
The old guy mold that I just can't quit, but I probably should, is Jameis Winston.
Sure. I'm with you on that, man. I'm never giving up.
Yeah, I love him. I mean, he's never been my quarterback where I have to yell at him when he throws a bazillion picks, but boy, he's fun to watch. Two that jump out at me are Daniel Jones. Although I thought he was overdrafted, and I'm not a believer, but he didn't have things easy in New York. I mean, by any stretch. Justin Fields?
That's the name I was waiting for.
Okay, yeah.
That's the name I was waiting for. I'm with you on that one.
I also threw out Mac Jones, who's still going to be a free agent. No one's going to bring him in and say he's their starter, but first round pick that did some okay things this year. And I definitely am not jumping on the table for this guy, but Zach Wilson is still out there. I mean, he's young and an early pick.
Yeah, still an opportunity there. And he's working with a great coach right now in Sean Payton, who tends to make quarterbacks better. It's just that Sean Payton got I shouldn't say immediate, but he got sustained success out of a growing Bo Nix throughout 2024. So I think that's an important piece of that information.
And Denver didn't give anything up for Zach Wilson. I mean, he's just a throw in and see what happens,
Yeah. Which kind of, I mean, like you look at Sam Darnold, right? Like Sam Darnold went to Carolina, and then all of a sudden he goes to, Minnesota. And really the kind of idea was that Sam Darnold was going to be there until JJ McCarthy's ready. And then all of a sudden Sam Darnold just kind of took off with that
McCarthy
Kevin O'Connell defense.
Right. I think that year in San Francisco did Darnold a lot of good too. No pressure, just learn from good people,
Yep. That's one of the reasons why I really like the Justin Fields pick too, is because he was, selected and, put in a bad situation over in Chicago. And then now he's been in Pittsburgh, and sure, he got thrown into some early action there and performed pretty well given, the situation. And then after that kind of got to sit back and rest and relax. And you've mentioned before that Justin Fields would be a really fun fit in Indianapolis to kind of help with the Anthony Richardson thing. Feels a lot like Sam Darnold being a really good fit over in Minnesota to help with the whole JJ McCarthy thing. Right. And so either Justin Fields takes off in Indianapolis, if he were to end up there, or the next stop or something like that. Like it feels like he's a guy that has that same kind of trajectory of just being around the right people. And I think that that's such a big part of a quarterback's development. It's not just being on the field and experience. Those things are absolutely huge. And you have to have, the natural, given talent and everything like that. But you got to be around the right people that are going to develop you. I think he's in that situation now in Pittsburgh.
Yeah, I can attest to that. I mean, I think he's very happy here, whether he's blowing smoke or not. He has publicly said, I'd love to come back in any capacity. I know him and Russell Wilson are very close. Like Russell Wilson was one of Fields' favorite quarterbacks when Fields was a teenager. That's who his favorite Madden guy was. And there's no animosity to him being number two. Right. And like you said, it's a very stable environment. Tomlin's been here forever. This could be the Darnold and the Niners year for Fields.
Yeah, I'm going to throw out a name that I don't think can become the next Sam Darnold, but has recently kind of elevated, is Trey Lance.
I was almost do the same. Yeah.
Yeah. He's a name that I considered, but that I wasn't going to put out as, yes, he's the next Sam Darnold. But how interesting would it be to see him continue with other teams and then see what he can eventually develop into? I think that's the thing, is you just kind of want to see, like, all right, spend some time in San Francisco, in Dallas, doing all this kind of stuff. Where does he end up next, and what opportunity does he get that's in front of him? I don't think he's the next Darnold, but it'll be interesting to watch his career trajectory nonetheless.
I mean, he'll be with the team. He'll probably be a number two. I mean, I guess if the Colts don't land Fields, maybe you'd take, that's a consolation prize or something like that. And we know how this league works. One injury away, you get another opportunity. Maybe. I don't think either one of us is standing on the table for him, but no, absolutely not.
Yeah. But interesting one to watch. And look, I'm happy for guys like Sam Darnold, Geno Smith, who you mentioned as well, these guys, Teddy Bridgewater back in the day when he kind of found his revitalization here in New Orleans. I think that's such a big thing because, and Pete Carroll has talked about this before, the NFL's lack of patience for quarterbacks, to see these guys on their third, fourth stop or whatever, take off and find success. I think that's a good thing. It's good to have those examples because it just begs patience and it shows the value of patience with some of these young guys.
I got one more that I don't know, I doubt moves, but it's nothing like the starter. There's been some recent buzz about him. Tanner McKee with the Eagles. Some people in the know like Tanner McKee. I mean, he's kind of the old school Bledsoe pocket passer only, which is outdated, but he's kind of good at it. I mean, he's nothing like Jalen Hurts.
Yeah. And he's nothing like Kenny Pickett either. That play where Kenny Pickett threw the ball but didn't throw the ball, excellent. Just like Benny Hill, great comedy. Absolutely. No, Tanner McKee's an interesting one because his draft buzz was really interesting too. He was a guy that just flew out of nowhere not out of nowhere. Obviously, he did the work, but he was an interesting one as kind of this publicly late riser when it came to the draft analysts and stuff like that. So interesting name for sure.
And
to
if
watch
by
out for.
chance Hurts can't go this week with the concussion, I think they will go McKee, not Pickett.
Yeah, absolutely. That could be.
I get it.
I mean, there you go. There's your opportunity to really like get out there on the map. Just play
Sure.
a playoff game. All right, coming up next, let's take a look at the future of a couple of players here in the great city of New Orleans. Alvin Kamara, Derek Carr. One of our listeners wants to know who could be back in 2025 and what's the future for both these players. I got some thoughts, and I want to hear what Matt thinks too. We got that coming up for you next as we continue on with the Peacock Williamson NFL Show, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode of Peacock and Williamson NFL Show brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. You like spreads? You like lines? You like player props, same game parlays, live betting, in-game drive bets? Well, guess what? FanDuel's got it all, and that's why they're America's #1 sportsbook. You can get in on all of the playoff action, even if you're not a fan of either of these teams that you might be watching. Become a fan because you got some money riding on them. That's what makes it so much fun over at FanDuel. Embrace the sweat. Go and check them out today. You can get in on some big lines right now. The Baltimore Ravens heavily favored over the Pittsburgh Steelers. The Buffalo Bills heavily favored in their matchup as well over the Denver Broncos. A bunch to get in on over at FanDuel. And right now, if you're a new customer, it's a great time to get started. You put $5 down as your first bet. You win that first bet, $250 in bonus bets coming your way, and you can use those bonus bets across all those player props, those lines, those spreads, those odds, the parlays, all of that good stuff as well. So go check them out today over at FanDuel.com. That's FanDuel.com for $250 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. All right, everybody, we're wrapping up today's episode of the Peacock and Williamson NFL Show. Matt Williamson and Ross Jackson here. Matt, unfortunately, I didn't do this at the beginning of the episode because I forgot, but I do want to take 1 second before we dive into the New Orleans conversation. Because I think we have a fair share of listeners, and it's unfortunate we have to do this multiple times in a couple of weeks, but we probably have a fair share of listeners in the California area, in the Southern California area right now. They're dealing with a massive wildfire, started in the East Palisades and has continued to like stretch along. Thousands and thousands of people impacted. Some people impacted because of their homes, other people impacted because of how this changes things. I used to live in Southern California. Makes things really, really challenging for everybody when this is dealt with, but none more challenging than those that are immediately impacted by it. So we do hope that you're well, and we hope that everything is going to pan out okay throughout all this. It's just such a wild situation, an unfathomable situation to try to quantify at all. But we do want to take a moment to send our well wishes for sure.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned it. And again, I hope everyone's okay. And it sounds like Brian will be back soon. That's his neck of the woods. So hopefully he doesn't have anyone negatively affected by it either.
Yeah. And we're certainly looking forward to having Brian back as well. So lots going on here in the world of sports and otherwise. Never an easy way to transition from stuff like this, but I did want to make sure that we, Matt and I did want to make sure we paid our respects and sent our well wishes there. So now I'll awkwardly transition back to the city of New Orleans and take a look at a question from Michael here, who wanted Ross's opinion, Ross's thoughts on Alvin Kamara and Derek Carr's futures with the New Orleans Saints. So I'm gonna make good on that question, and Matt, I'm gonna give my opinion on both of these guys.
Yeah,
and I want to know what you think in the midst of all this as well. Here's the way that I see it in terms of I'm gonna delineate this 2 different ways. I'm gonna tell you what I think the team will do. I'm gonna tell you what I think the team should do. So we're gonna do 2 different ones here, and they'll each be quick. But what I think the team will do, as they sit currently $50 million over the salary cap for 2025.
As usual.
And really that's small potatoes for the New Orleans.
Right.
Usually I'm covering them coming out of 100 million, like easy. But I think what the team probably will do is restructure Derek Carr's contract. That will save them $30 million, gets them to just $20 million under. You go to Cam Jordan and a couple of these other veterans, you ask for pay cuts, you can restructure some young guys on the offensive line and stuff like that to open up some of that money and then get to a place where you can spend. And really, depending upon how deep they're willing to go, and if they get the restructures done and get some pay cuts done, Matt, they could have a lot of money to spend over the course of this offseason relative to what New Orleans usually has to spend over an offseason. As for Alvin Kamara is here in 2025. I don't think that there's anything that's going to change that. They just gave him an extension this past season. There's nothing built into that extension. Matt, you know how this goes. Sometimes you see these mechanisms get built in when a new contract gets done that signals like, well, maybe that actually ends up opening up for this out at this time. There's nothing built into Alvin Kamara's contract, at least that I know of, that looks that way. So I expect Alvin Kamara to be back in 2025. What I think the team should do is Alvin Kamara is back in 2025, but I think they should seriously consider a split from Derek Carr. And a lot of people who are Derek Carr fans just gasped. They clutched their chest, everything like that. Let me explain. I think that a split is best for both of those sides. It's best for Derek Carr. It's best for New Orleans. New Orleans needs to start a rebuild. Derek Carr doesn't have time to go through a rebuild. He's entering the twilight of his career. Let him go and find another spot. He's got a no trade clause. See if he'll waive it. If not, designate him a post June 1 cut. Give him the opportunity to go out. You're going to have to do some more things to make money that way, Matt. But that's what I think they should do. You got a new head coach coming in. Let that head coach start building things in their vision. You got Derek Carr going out. Let him go and find something, a place where he can land that's going to be a little bit more of a competitor for him, because I don't expect New Orleans to be competing in 2025.
Yeah, you laid that out great, and I agree with a lot of it and expect a lot of that. I kind of thought that this upcoming year would be the first time that they didn't treat the season like Mardi Gras, and you know, it's hangover day. You know, I mean, finally, right.
Yeah, it's Ash Wednesday.
Exactly. I always say that about the Saints. They treat it like it's Mardi Gras, and they're not worried about the hangover. But someday the hangover's coming. You know, and I thought maybe this upcoming year, the new coach would make sense to eat your vegetables, get your cap in line.
Yeah.
Not tank, but if you stumbled into the first overall pick a year from now in a quarterback-rich draft, okay, that's not so terrible. Yeah. So a couple questions I had for you, and you basically answered them, was Demario Davis, Cam Jordan, you know, some foundational older dudes. We know Ramchek's now out of the equation.
Right.
Do we know they'll be back? You know, like those type of guys.
Yeah, I can say that I would confidently say we don't know that they're back. Yeah. You know what I mean? I think it's likely that they are. I would include Tyrann Mathieu, the starting safety, as well in that conversation. We know, just to your point, Ryan Ramczyk, they reduced his salary from $18 million to $1.255 million, brought all the way down to a vet minimum. So then that's signaling his retirement, which won't be posted until June 2nd, but it immediately saved him like $16.7 million. It's why they're currently $50 million over the salary cap instead of $66 million over the salary cap. Lovely. And so like it helps. And so we know that that's coming. But look, I mean, I've spoken to Cam, and Cam has made it very clear. Cam Jordan has made it very clear that if he's not in New Orleans next season, it's not because he doesn't want to be in New Orleans next season. It's because the team moves on from him. But I think they could go to him and say, look, your production over the course of the past couple of years is this. The role we want you to fill in 2025 is this. The fair amount of pay for what we believe the role in 2025 is this. And then ask him, and you're not really going to Cam, right? You're going to Cam's agent, his representation. But you're saying, like, here's what we think you can get on the open market for a 35-year-old, 34-year-old edge rusher. Here's what we
love your leadership and want you in the building. And
And so we'll pay a little bit above that, but less than what was agreed upon for you to do that role, because that's what we think is fair for that role.
Maybe reduce your snaps a little bit and not beat you up as much. And right.
And I think that they probably go for that. Cam wants to finish his career here in New Orleans. He doesn't want to go anywhere else. And as for Demario,
real quick, Ross, and all those guys too could also start the season with the Saints, but then the trade deadline rolls around and someone needs a linebacker. You know what I mean? Right. Yeah.
Yep. All that kind of stuff can happen for sure. Or, you know, you're plummeting come the trade deadline. You want to give those guys an opportunity to land with a potential playoff team, especially now that the trade deadline's later, gives you an opportunity to really gauge that well, stuff like that. Like any of that could happen. Demario looked stronger at the end of the season than he looked at the beginning of the season. So I don't think he's going anywhere. And then Tyrann has made it pretty apparent that he wants to continue to play, I think, for at least like another couple of years. And he's another guy that wants to finish his career here in New Orleans. So
that's home too, right? I know he went to LSU, but that's home too, right?
Yeah, he's here, Fifth Ward guy from New Orleans and everything, like right across the street from me. And so like he's from around these parts. And so it means a lot to him to be able to play in his hometown. And so and I do want to be clear too, the Saints can get out of their salary cap situation if they restructure Derek Carr this year. It doesn't, you're either restructuring Derek Carr, or you're restructuring other people. You're in the same situation one way or another. You know what I mean? And so if the Saints were to say, hey, incoming head coach, you're going to get effectively a free year because you're going to have our quarterback instead of your quarterback, just be patient with this. This guarantees you a year. And then now you get to go into 2026, like you mentioned, in a quarterback rich draft and try to draft your own, go out there and handpick your guy. Not a bad setup at all either.
No.
For a young coach to have a veteran guy that knows the offense. You're probably sticking with Clint Kubiak if you don't hire an offensive head coach, and then you can build from there. So it can be a selling point for the head coach situation as well, even though people will tell you it's not.
So my last two nuggets concern Carr and Kamara. That, frankly, I was shocked that they signed Kamara to this most recent deal right before the trade deadline. Like, I thought, boy, the Chiefs should give you something for Kamara. Imagine that guy on the Chiefs right now. Like I thought he might be desired by, a real contender. Didn't go that way, so he's going back. That surprised me at the time.
Sure.
If you were in charge, if you're Mickey Loomis and he agrees to it and the Giants offer you a 3rd-round pick for Carr, are you taking it?
Yeah, probably.
Okay.
I think the Saints. Yeah, I think the Saints above anything else, what they need beyond money is draft capital. And if you can get some decent draft capital in that situation, and that would give them
it would open up money.
Yeah, and it would also give them a third round pick for this year. You got a 1st-round values worth of 3rd-round picks, Matt. No, I'm just kidding. But you could package those, move up, and everything like that, which we know the New Orleans Saints love to do. It gets you this much closer to going and get whoever your guys are in that draft. So I do think that would be a value too, or more draft picks, right? More draft picks,
just more draft picks,
more youth,
yeah,
and everything. So yeah, I would consider that for sure. I would consider.
But I don't think you want to.
And if there's a way you can do it with the money.
You don't want to go into opening day with Spencer Rattler unchallenged as a starter, though, either.
Yeah, I think you want to have competition, right?
Yeah,
Spencer Rattler's only going to get better with competition. You know what I mean? And so you would definitely want that. No doubt about that. So that's the way we see it working out in New Orleans. Thanks, Matt. That was fun.
Oh, that was great.
We'll have to do that again over on Locked On Saints.
All right. I'm in.
Everybody, we appreciate you so much for joining us for another episode of the Peacock Williamson NFL Show. We will be back with you tomorrow, looking ahead to the first wild card weekend and giving you all those predictions. Just a heads up, it'll be a little bit of a later episode release. Got to do some stuff at each facility and things like that, and figure out some schedules and things like that, because we might be looking at a big return at some point here soon. So lots coming up here on the Peacock Williamson NFL Show. Thank you very much for making us your first listen and for being in every day or here on the show with us. For Matt Williamson, I am Ross Jackson. We'll see you here again soon here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.